The regular season has come to a close, and Florida State finishes off a perfect 12-0 season. Now on the recruiting front, National Early Signing Day is less than a month away now. So in this video, we're going to look at Florida State's top remaining targets coming down this final stretch of the 2024 recruiting cycle. There's quite a few guys out there uncommitted still, quite a few flips in the cards, so let's dive into it. Now I'll start this out with the guy who I think is probably most likely Florida State's next commit into this class, and that's four-star top 100 DB Kai Bates out of Orlando, Florida. He was formally committed to LSU before decommitting back in early November, which came after he visited Tallahassee for the Miami game. And this is a guy Florida State's been in on heavy for a while now. It sounds like the biggest competition here may be Tennessee. He was supposed to take a visit there a couple weeks ago, but actually decided to go to the FAMU game instead, which I think is actually a very good sign for Florida State in this one. It's kind of gotten quiet lately around that recruitment, but I still think Florida State is a trending school to land him, and it sounds like that announcement may even come before signing day. So definitely keep an eye out for that one. Could be any day now for the Noles to add another blue chip DB very, very soon. Now, staying on that DB position, another guy Florida State is very high on is four-star safety Zay Mincy out of Mainland High School in Daytona Beach. He's a 6'3", 180-pound prospect, and it sounds like he's probably the most coveted guy left on Florida State's board right now. FSU and especially Mike Norvell really likes Mincy a lot. He's also in town for that Miami weekend and spent multiple days in Tallahassee on that visit. Now, this was kind of an interesting recruitment. For a while, I thought, along with everybody else, thought he was pretty much a Florida lock, but that seems to have faded some recently. And then it kind of seemed like he may have been trending towards Miami, but now it seems like it's become a fairly open battle, honestly. I'd say Florida State is firmly in the mix there, along with schools like Alabama. Of course, Florida and Miami are still involved there, too. What's interesting in this one is he's teammates with five-star defensive lineman L.J. McCray, who's committed to the Gators right now, and we'll talk about him here in just a minute. But after losing to the Noles last weekend and falling to 5-7 on the season, Florida's fired their defensive backs coach Corey Raymond and their defensive lines coach. Now, I think this makes the final stretch of recruiting for guys like Mincy and LJ very interesting, losing their position coaches. It's hard to have a pulse on the Mincy recruitment right now, but I do think Florida State is pushing very hard for him. I'm sure they're looking to get him back on campus for either that December 8th or December 15th weekend, and if they do, look out for the Noles in this one. So now we can talk a little bit about LJ McCray, and this has been a kind of frustrating recruitment, to be honest. He committed to the Gators back in October over the Noles, although it was a super close race, and of course Mike Norvell and the staff have still continued to recruit him. He was also back on campus for that Miami game and enjoyed a multi-day visit, and sounds like he spent a lot of personal time with Mike Norvell. I think this one has actually gotten interesting recently, especially since, like I mentioned earlier, Florida firing their defensive line coach definitely shakes things up a bit. Now, I don't think that firing in particular will have a ton of effect on LJ, as it also sounds like UF offered his dad a job, which is kind of odd in my opinion. But I think what makes this recruitment interesting is, for one, Florida State was heavily considered before he ultimately committed to Florida. But now with FSU finishing a perfect undefeated season, while Florida didn't even get bowl eligible, that speaks volumes, and I think turns recruits off a bit, because who knows if Billy Napier, or any members of that coaching staff for that matter, will be there in 2 years. Florida has a very, very tough schedule in 2024, and if they underperform again, which they probably will, I wouldn't be surprised to see them looking for a new coach. So if you're a top recruit, you're looking at this scenario, you got to feel a little uncertain about the future, whereas Mike Norvell literally just got a contract extension like 2-3 days ago. So look for LJ to get back to FSU at least one more time between now and early signing day, and hopefully the staff can work out a flip here. Now, a new name that's kind of popped up on the board recently, and he's actually a kid I really, really like. Four-star safety Coy Parrish, who's currently a Minnesota commit since about April, and he's a kid who has completely surged in the 247 rankings. For context, this time last year he was ranked in the high 600s, and now he's risen up to number 84 nationally. Florida State has gotten involved late here, as it sounds like a lot of other schools have as well. Ohio State, Wisconsin, USC, and several others have all offered him recently. So I don't see him ultimately sticking with his Minnesota commitment. He does have an official visit scheduled to Florida State on that December 15th weekend, which is right before signing day. And even though they're getting into the action late, I can very well see them pulling it off if they impress on that visit. And again, that DB class is looking absolutely insane. Now, I've been asked about a couple other guys here, so I'll go ahead and touch on some of them real quick. Jason Zandamela, the four-star offensive lineman that's currently committed to USC. Back in the spring, he had a couple of predictions logged to Florida State, and it seems like they were definitely the favorite at one point. but he ultimately committed to USC back in the summer, and he's been expected back to Florida State a few times recently and hasn't shown. So it doesn't sound like there's too much smoke there right this moment. I do think he'll make it back at least once before signing, and the good news here is that he hasn't used his official visit to Florida State yet. So they still have that in their back pocket to try to use and make one last impression. And you can never count out Alex Atkins in recruiting. Now, I know there's been some smoke with five-star defensive line commit Armando Blunt. People are worried about Miami working to flip him back, and I'll say this. At least at the moment, I'm not super concerned here. I know he's been to Miami twice recently, but you got to look at context. For one, he took a video in their stadium doing the tomahawk chop. It's a pretty good sign. But you also got to remember he's from Miami. It's not a long trip for him to go visit for these games. And, you also can't expect the hometown school, especially when it's Miami, to just go away. Especially when recruiting a five-star like Blunt is. They're going to try anything and everything they have to flip him back from us. But luckily, I think the staff is on top of it, and I still like the Noles to sign him here in just a few weeks. So yeah, guys, it's fixing to get pretty wild heading down the stretch now until signing day. There's going to be lots of visits, lots of flips, lots of cryptic tweets, all kinds of craziness to keep an eye on over the next several weeks, especially with the transfer portal fixing to open up as well, and the Noles being in the thick of the postseason. So there's going to be a ton to keep up with. You'll definitely want to stay in the loop, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel and like this video. I'll have a portal video coming out soon as well, looking into a possible transfer quarterback the staff is looking at. So stay tuned for that, and as always, go Noles and finish for 13.